Today's episode is brought to you by Create Engage, the digital marketing agency for the disruptive management consultancy. Digital marketing has moved forwards, but most consulting firms haven't. Many consulting firms still see their corporate blog as their sole digital marketing channel and find themselves frustrated when these blogs yield little, if any, results. For those consultancies that understand digital marketing, though, it can be a huge asset and help them achieve rapid business growth. In fact, at Create Engage, we've recently written a case study of one successful consulting firm that used digital marketing to help them grow over 400% in just 3 years. Having spent countless hours researching consulting firms and consulting leaders for this podcast, it became very clear that while some firms do digital marketing well, the vast majority of consulting firms struggle to leverage its power and don't know where to start. To help those of you who want to harness the power of digital marketing to grow your consulting business, but don't have the knowledge, capacity, or in-house capability to do so, I launched Create Engage, the first digital marketing agency for the management consulting industry. As former consultants ourselves, we understand the challenges that you face when it comes to delivering effective digital marketing that engages prospective clients and generates leads. Having worked in the industry, we understand consulting buyers, what resonates with them and what doesn't. This enables us to harness the latest in digital marketing in a way that aligns with your brand and your market positioning to attract the prospective clients that you're looking to target. We understand that each consultancy is unique and have a range of services to help you shape, implement, and sustain effective digital marketing strategies that deliver results, regardless of where you are on your digital marketing journey. If you would like to find out more about how Create Engage can help you use digital marketing to take your business to the next level, then send me an email at nick@createengage.co.uk or go to our website, createengage.co.uk, where you can download that free case study that breaks down the digital marketing strategies used by one successful consulting firm to help them grow over 400% in just 3 years and gives you the secrets they used so that you can apply them in your own firm. If you want to outpace your competitors and stand out in the crowded consulting market, then get in touch. We'd love to help you grow your business through digital marketing. Hi, and welcome to Climbing Consulting. Today's episode is taken from an interview that I recently did for Sales for Startups as part of their fantastic interview series. This series, hosted by their CEO, James Ker-Reid, explores many of the key topics that anyone launching their own business needs to think about. Much like we do for Climbing Consulting, James interviews leaders from various fields to share their insights and experience with his audience, giving them advice on everything from fundraising and the accounting technicalities you need to think about, right through to sales and marketing. As you probably guessed, James asked if I would take part in the series to share my advice on marketing for startup consulting businesses. In this conversation, I share much of the advice that we're giving to our clients day in, day out. I explain the Create Engage philosophy, our approach to marketing, and give you our top tips for what you should be doing right now to help you create effective marketing that generates return on investment for your consulting business. As James's series is targeted at startups more generally, there is a little bit of a build-up to this episode where we just clarify what it means by consulting and the types of consultants we work with and how that relates to James's client base more broadly. But as you'll hear, after that short intro, we quickly dive in to some really important points that are critical for you if you are looking to grow your consultancy. So, with the intro done and dusted, please enjoy today's episode of Climbing Consulting, my interview for the Sales for Startups interview series.
So, Nick, great to have you on the line and to really share some best practice with the consultancy market. I've engaged with quite a few consultancy owners over the years. I'm obviously one of them as well. So I have a self-interest in this interview. So very excited. Self-interest does sometimes win the day. So my first question for you is just to give the audience a bit of a flavor as to who you are, what Create Engage, what market do they serve, what type of consultancies do they serve. That'd be great for the audience before we kick off with the interview.
Sure, James. Well, firstly, thanks for inviting me on. Great to be here with you today. And as we were saying just before this, I think, technology is showing us that you don't need to be face to face to do a lot of these things. And, while none of us want to be in the situation we are, I think, being able to use tools like Zoom, like we're doing here, has been brilliant and continues to be. So who are we? So Create Engage is a digital marketing agency focused largely on the management consulting industry. So our core niche, and we'll come on to a bit later, actually, why we focus on a niche, but our core niche is management consulting firms. We, in effect, work with consulting firms who are looking to grow and firms that are looking to grow through marketing. So our typical clients will have grown very successfully. They've had a good number of years, and that can be anything from 2 years to 10 years of solid growth through sales, through networking, and that tends to run out at some point. Ultimately, your black book can only take you so far, and in circumstances like this, unfortunately, your black book can't really take you anywhere because you can't go and have those coffees, those beers, the things that people use as sales tools in our market. So we help our clients use effective digital marketing to generate return on investment. And we can delve into what that means. But I think one thing more generally is marketing's had quite a bad reputation in our industry. I think consulting has traditionally been a sort of relationship business and should always be relationship based. But, you're a sales expert yourself. There's certain levels in the funnel where it's not economic, it's not efficient to make a relationship. And so actually that's where marketing can come in. And for our clients, they see that and they know that they need to do something different, and digital gives them those tools, and we help them do that in the most effective way to generate return on investment.
Makes sense to me. One quick clarification question. You mentioned management consulting and consultancy. What's the difference for you?
Yeah, sure. So it's broadly semantics, but thank you for sort of highlighting it because I should have clarified. So for us, management consulting firms are typically firms that do project-based work, could be change projects. They work with large corporate organizations. Now, that is obviously one type of consulting. What you do is consulting, what we do is consulting. But I would almost broaden it out to we support B2B services organizations. So if you sell a service to another business, we can support you, and the approaches we offer can help you. Obviously, because of our fees and our price point, there is an element of you have to be a certain size to be able to afford what we do and almost for it to be economic for you. But that's where, as I say, our core focus is management consulting, but I would broaden that out to consulting. And within that could include things like legal firms, accounting firms, anyone who's selling services or expertise. And it's worth touching on, and we'll go on to niche, like I said, but we serve broader. So, we're just about to launch a podcast with a very well-known Silicon Valley tech firm. We've worked with a water company. We do go broader, but our core focus is that services, that consulting specialism. Does that make sense?
That does, yeah. So if I refer to consulting or consultancy, you're happy if I use those terms interchangeably?
Absolutely. And I'd welcome, James, if throughout this there's anything I touch on that you from your experience, you see a different view because of certain types of consulting, let's call it out. Because I think, like you say, the word consulting can mean a lot of things, and it's good to be sort of clear on and specific on it. So yeah, use them interchangeably, and we can sort of flag if we need to deviate from that.
Yeah, sounds good, Nick. So what are the 3 biggest problems and mistakes that consultancy owners make with their marketing?
It's a really good question. And I think first and foremost is frankly not doing it. So like I said in sort of the introduction, I think our industry as consulting, and this is broadly across any service industry, tends to start where someone who's really good at what they do and has got a good reputation will go out on their own, and they'll start by building their business through their network, and they will continue doing that. And so that's where, for me, the first and foremost, the challenge is they don't think about marketing. As a consultant, when you're sort of starting out, you don't learn about marketing. You learn about sales, you learn about business development. So things around how do you shape a market, your proposition, what's your go-to-market strategy? These aren't necessarily things that people focus on. So that's number one, simply not doing it, not giving it enough thought. I think then for those that are actually doing it, there's sort of 2 key points. So the first is actually the what are you putting out? So, we as an agency are massive believers that marketing is ultimately about giving value. Consulting firms talk about nothing but giving value to their clients. But a lot of firms, when it comes to marketing, forget that. They almost see marketing as advertising. And so with things like posts on LinkedIn or white papers, it becomes very much sales focused. It's more of almost a sales pack as opposed to a marketing pack, but you'll put a sort of marketing wrapper around it. And I think the hard thing with that is clients see through it. Sometimes we sort of delude ourselves, they don't, but we've had this feedback direct from our clients. They know the difference. They're people like you and I. They can spot a sales pack that's sort of dressed up as marketing a mile off. So that's number two. And then the third is very much, I guess, not putting enough thought into that marketing plan and how it all ties together. So doing the odd post here, the odd blog there, and not thinking about it as a coherent and cohesive approach. I sometimes use the analogy of going to the gym. I'll hear people say, "Oh, we've tried marketing; it doesn't give us any returns." I did 5 blogs, no one called me, and I guess it's the same as if you were to go to the gym. You went this week, you went in 2 months' time, and you went in 5 months' time, and you didn't get any fitter, healthier, or whatever your goals are you going to blame you or the gym? And I think it's the same with marketing is, just like if you want to get in shape, you need a concerted plan. It takes time and those results compound. Marketing is the same. So those are probably the 3 big areas that I'd say, consulting firms get wrong.
And are there, of those 3 problems, when you mature up the consultancy rate in terms of revenue, using that as a starting point, are there ones that people major on within that according to their stage, Nick?
Really good question, James. And if I'm honest, I'd say no. I think when you get to the sort of mid to large firms, it's very much the latter. So that is a distinction. But in the sort of everyone from one-man bands to that sort of mid-size, I guess sort of, 8-figure sort of revenue size, it can be any and all. So I've seen firms who have grown very successfully with very little marketing, so they're not doing it bucket. But then, like you say, I think when people start it, that's when I probably see in equal measure the failing to have a clear strategy and doing the sales and the advertising. I think many firms across that spectrum are very guilty of the advertising piece. And we'll come on to probably a bit later some of the ways you can sort of reverse this. But then the clear strategy almost ties in with that. Because if you haven't got a clear strategy, you're going to have disjointed content. And if you do, but your content is sales focused, you're not going to see any results because it's not marketing. And so those 2 issues almost tie together. And you kind of need to fix both of them. If you fix one, not the other, you're not going to see the results you want, which is where then marketing can sometimes get a bad reputation for not delivering in our industry.
Yeah, I wanted to pick up on that, Nick. That's quite an interesting observation. You talked a lot about strategy, and a lot of people out there, consultancy owners, will be really concerned about execution, implementation, or production potentially in their world. And that a lot of marketing agencies or consultancies that people may be speaking to right now will say, we need to get your plan together, we need to get your strategy together, which all makes sense. But also there is the other part where the value is realized, which is the execution of that strategy. And a lot of people don't get to that stage either with the same agency, or they don't see in the period that's suggested within the strategy the value that's been professed to them up front. What are your thoughts on that?
Let me take them as 2 separate questions. Let me start with strategy and then come on to sort of time frame and the agency side. So I think the strategic piece is first, if you don't start there, you're never going to see results. And so with any of our clients, and it's something we give away for free on our website, we use our digital marketing framework. It's a really clear, structured framework that we work through for any client, whether it's at their sort of firm-wide marketing strategy, be it a practice within that, or be it a campaign they're looking to run. Tomorrow we're launching a campaign with a new client. It's a small campaign, but the first thing we're doing is a workshop based on that framework. Because if you don't have that clarity on the core strategic elements, what makes you unique as a business? Who are you targeting? What's that target client? What are the messages that will resonate? It's impossible to do the rest. You're just guessing. And so that's where we start. And like I say, it's free on our website. I can give you the link after this so you can put it in the show notes for people. Right. Then the sort of next piece about the how long it needs. Well, I think the first thing to say is it doesn't have to be an agency. I obviously I'd love it if clients came to us, but I don't think everyone needs an agency, and I don't think an agency is right for everyone. And so, without going into too much detail about our model, we will only take clients who are prepared to commit to a certain investment. And obviously that has a financial aspect, but from our side, it's a support aspect, because below that, we don't believe we can give them the value that they need. And so I would much rather, if someone comes to me and says we've got a certain budget that I know we can't deliver sort of tangible value for them within, to say, go and do it yourself. Go and find a freelancer on Fiverr who can do this for you, because you have right now, particularly for those who are at the earlier stages where they probably have more time than money, they're better off investing in that way. When you get to a bigger size, the trade-off flips. If you're a busy, successful consulting firm, regardless of what you do, your niche, and you're making good day rates, at some point it becomes just much more cost effective to get an agency in. And then in terms of that time frame, I think part of it is about where is the client and what are they trying to achieve? Where are you as a consulting firm? I've seen consulting firms across the whole gamut, from people who have, basically a fully fledged marketing function and we just need to press the accelerator, all the way down to people who have got nothing. They haven't got intro packs. They haven't, some firms don't even really have a true brand. And so actually part of that question about what can we expect, what are the timeframes, really needs to be rooted in that. Because again, take the gym analogy. If you have sat on the sofa for 5 years and you're just getting into the gym, well, maybe being able to run 2 kilometers in 3 months is a great result for you. But if you've been doing Ironmans or triathlons, you're going to be moving so much further in that 3 months, but those goals are relative. So it's hard to say, it's the question I always get, how many leads should we expect? What's the average? What's the norm? Part of the challenge is there isn't a specific norm, because if we're working with a consulting firm of 100 consultants who have, 10 years track record and, thousands of contacts, they're going to get a very different result to a firm who's got 10 consultants. But equally, the firm who's got 10 consultants doesn't need as much business and probably can't manage as much business. If we were able to get both of them the same amount of business, same amount of leads, the bigger one would be really happy and the smaller one would drown. So part of this is relative, but I think the key thing is starting with strategy, building a clear plan off the back of it, and then committing to that plan. Regardless of size, if you deviate from that, if you sort of falter, you're not going to see it through, because you won't get that compounding. If you have a 12-month plan that you've committed to and you stop it at month 4, whether that's with an agency or yourselves, you're not going to see the results that you want.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think it's that point. What we've learned in our consulting industry is that in the technology sector, that differentiating on execution rather than strategy is a better gameplay, because strategy does have a modicum of, it almost has a bit of a ceiling in terms of how good the strategy can be, but the execution really doesn't, because ultimately if you can deliver better results to that client even with a similar strategy or some resemblance to someone else's strategy they would have created, you will still be the provider of choice, and therefore you'll get referenceability, you'll be well known in your space. So my question was certainly focused on the ability to, I guess, distinguish between those that do great execution and those that maybe do poor execution in as a marketing provider, and what are maybe some of those questions or things that founders can be wary of when making that decision on whether from the transition from strategy and execution, how successful that's going to be.
If the question is what to look for in a marketing agency is sort of what I'm taking that as, I guess there's a few things. I mean, there's the sort of the most fundamental for me, and I'll come on to the sort of the I guess the cliched ones of experience in industry and track record. I guess first and foremost is there has to be a fit, and you have to, I guess, believe in where the agency is sort of steering you. So for what we do, and I know obviously you're sort of more focused in the tech industry where things are, at that cutting edge. Well, the first and foremost is does the agency you're working with understand, the latest mediums? Do they understand where marketing's going? So, take things like podcasts, which while they've been going, podcasts have been mainstream for about 5 years. They're now in our industry, I guess, starting to come to the fore, in that sort of B2B space, they're coming to the fore. If you're a tech firm, you're looking to use that as a medium, do the agencies you're talking to understand that? Likewise, things like video, the amount of consulting firms and tech firms that aren't necessarily maximizing that. If you're talking to agencies, do they get it? I think the interesting one for me is, and this is genuinely why, we have a very much an open and honest approach, is marketing almost can be fall foul of its own marketing. Is that there's a number, and it's worth saying, James, for me, I'm not going to sort of bash any of my competitors, and it's not actually something I spend a lot of time doing, looking at what my competitors do. But from anecdotal sort of conversations with clients and others in the market, I know there are some out there who I guess focus on the data, focus on the sort of results. And now obviously that's key. Clients want results, but I think you've always got to dig into, if someone's promising you X number of leads, what does that mean? And what does that look like? And actually, you talk about this sort of that combination of strategy and execution. And I think it has to be a combination, and it has to be execution aligned to your strategy. I could go and get you 100 leads tomorrow just by sort of blasting a LinkedIn search and copy and pasting all of them. We all get those emails, but it's about quality, and it's about getting the right people. Now, this is where I guess there is a slight nuance between sort of management consulting, the term I'm using, and I guess sort of more of a SaaS-based tech product, because our clients are typically selling, contracts of £100,000 upwards. So, the number of clients our clients need to have a very successful business is very small. If you have 10 £1 million clients, you have a very good business. And, regardless whether your goal's to grow, to make a livelihood for yourself, whether it's to sell and make an exit, there's a lot of people out there who buy a £10 million business. Obviously, if you're selling a SaaS product, that's a slightly different sort of sales model, different approach, and may need slightly different things in terms of marketing. But I think it's key that anyone you work with should understand what you do, understand those nuances. And as a founder of a consulting firm, almost you want to dig into that. So it's make sure they understand what's going on in digital, they understand the latest concepts, the latest strategies, but also make sure there's a realism and that confidence in them that they can deliver what you need, and almost take a stock check. What we do is not a state agency, and trust me, I've done a state agency. You don't just take the person who offers you the biggest amount of money. We all do it with houses. If you ever sold a house, you go with the agent who says it's the biggest number. And agents know, it's what they know in the industry. You say you've the biggest number, and then you sort of negotiate it down over time. With marketing, it doesn't work like that, but there are a number out there who do sell like that. So if you are listening to this as a prospective client, obviously ask for proof that your agency can deliver, but then make sure that the agency is the right fit for you, not simply the one who's given you the biggest number of leads that they say they can get you on the sales pack.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So in the climate we're in today, a lot of consulting firms and other businesses are turning to content production and publication. That obviously puts a lot of strain on the company sometimes, and even the skills of the individuals.
Yeah.
But looking in a positive way for those wanting to engage in that practice, which I think is the right one as well, what should they measure? And then what is some of the best ways to repurpose that content to kind of keep that machine going? And I guess when we talk about machine, how do we actually structure that content production and publication machine is probably my bigger question.
It's a really key question. I think the first point to start is actually, what are you creating? So before even measuring, you mentioned around, we're in, highly unusual times right now. This is probably a 1 in 100, if not 1 in 200 year event. The whole world is doing what we're doing right now, working from home. And actually the first thing to think about is, okay, what am I putting out? And the reason I say that is people are looking for different things. So for instance, for probably the last 6 months, we would have told every client we work with and any other consulting firm to avoid webinars, because largely people are busy. Your executive clients are in tons of meetings. And actually right now we're telling them the reverse, and we're seeing fantastic results from it. Our clients are seeing fantastic results from it because people are at home. They need help. Your clients need help. They have this spare time because their diaries aren't full of meetings. They're not traveling. If you've got a global client, they're no longer able to, fly all around the world. They've suddenly got time. And the reason I highlight that as just an example is that's the first question is, what are you creating? And to our point around starting with strategy, how is it aligned to the current context? So if you used to just do 5 blogs, a blog a week, and you're still doing a blog a week, why are you doing that? Is it the right thing for your audience? I can't answer that, but that's what people need to think about. So that's the first thing. Actually, what are you doing? Then in terms of measurement, so again, depends on the content. So we're massive believers that you need to be clear on why you're producing content and what it's for. So is it that brand building, that awareness piece? Take this, for instance. This is very much around getting people to know you, getting people to know me. It's the same with our podcast. It's giving tons of value and letting people find you. It's more of that awareness. On the other side, if you're doing something, really sort of targeted lead generating content, be it an ebook, be it a webinar, you need to be clear on what that is, because that impacts measurement. So for me, for instance, the focus for something like this would be how many people are listening. Is that trend going up? Is it going down? What are people listening to? So, something that we do with our podcast is focus on who are the guests who get the most listens? What are the topics people want to hear about? That's what you should be measuring with this sort of content. With your lead generating content, it's leads. It's as simple as that. If you're doing a webinar and you get 20 people sign up, that's 20 emails, 20 people you can move into your BD funnel and start to have those conversations with. And the key thing is then just to be mindful and really monitor what's going on. So I'll give you a really live example in our business. We started a newsletter at the start of this year. It got some really good traction. And then over the last probably month or so, for a number of reasons, that's dropped. And due to the current situation, we as a team, we reviewed it, we looked at the numbers, and actually we're parking that. We're going to let everyone know, sorry, this is being stopped, because as an initiative, it's not delivering what we need. Take the podcast, for instance, it's continuing to grow, it's continuing to lead to business, we're continuing to do it. So that gives you that sort of measurement piece. And then the last one was about repurposing, was that right?
That's right, yeah.
So, it's a great point you make, James. And actually if I'm honest, I should have said this at the start. It's one of the things so many consulting firms get wrong. I think in professional services, we have this focus on thought leadership. Everyone talks about being a thought leader, and almost infers that means you can't keep saying the same thing. You've got to be the first with the new. You've got to have the new concept, the new idea, and actually, I think what that leads to is a lot of new thought, but not always a lot of good thought. Everyone wants to be the first to say something. But often, your clients don't need the first, they need the best. And actually, when I look at a lot of firms that our clients work with, and, I'm sure it's the same with your clients, they're not solving brand new problems. We're not all running AI and businesses to do heart surgery. Most people need help putting IT systems in or selling to customers. Your business is the oldest problem in the world. You help people sell what they do, and you're making a successful business out of it. And this is where I think people forget that a lot of content, if you've just got great ideas, run with it. So I mentioned that digital marketing framework. We've been using that for over a year now. Last Friday, I ran a webinar just on that. We've got an ebook. It's generated over 150 leads for us and continues to do so because it's good content and it's valuable. And so that's the first thing, is actually think what you're creating. And then to your point around actually repurposing, this is where I was going is, if you've got great content, just keep reusing it, resharing it, and saying it in different ways. Because I think people sometimes get nervous that if you post too much and whatever you define as too much, someone's going to get annoyed. This sort of mythical client suddenly going to call up and go, James, I'm firing you because you post too much. And, I'm sure you've heard this too. But actually, most people don't notice your content. They don't see it, especially right now. You talked about the current climate. We're seeing, clients' sort of average engagement go down. And I can tell you that's simply because so many more people are posting on LinkedIn. There is a ton of content. People who never would have posted before are posting pictures of Zoom calls, posting articles. The volume of traffic and content has gone up. The speed of your feed's gone up, which means you need to do more to get seen. And so that's where that repurposing comes in. If you've got something like this, for instance, this should be chopped. If you've done an interview, let's say, you can chop that into little video clips, audio clips. We're actually just transcribing one of our own webinars to turn into an ebook. There's so many different ways you can repurpose. And almost for anyone listening to this, if you've recently done a piece of content, I'd just sit there with a blank piece of paper and say, how can I create 10 different things from this? And it's worth saying one of those is simply reusing it. To the point around thought leadership, people sometimes, I guess, forget that you can just reshare something. We did it actually with a client last week, and it was their most successful piece of content all month. And the simple reason being it was timely. So about 3 months ago when we shared it, wasn't a hot agenda topic. Now, because of what it was talking about. It's a really hot agenda topic, and so tons of people were interested in it. So yeah, for the repurposing, I think people need to think about good thought, not thought leadership, and then look at what they can do to maximize the value from that.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. So moving that content that you've created and using it as lead generation, you mentioned about ebooks as well. What are some of the most effective ways to, in effect, take that long form content or potentially awareness material and convert it into a lead generation engine or funnel for your business?
And it is, it's key for any consulting firm. Ultimately, you need that pillar content, that core piece of content that will generate leads. And obviously, as there's now more content in the world, people are quite selective about what they'll give their emails for. So I think the first thing is almost you need to build the content with the end in mind. So I would never say, talks to the point earlier about start with strategy is don't create content and then figure out how to make it a lead generator. Decide that you want to create a campaign that generates leads and build the strategy and the content from it. So, if I give you our own example from the ebook that we still use, when we were creating that, over a year ago, we knew we wanted to attract founders and managing partners of small consulting firms. We knew they would be interested in seeing how others similar to them have achieved success. And so we developed a case study that broke down the strategies used by a very successful firm in our industry. And knowing that, people were then prepared to share their email addresses for it. So that would be the primary focus. I mean, obviously the technical aspects of stick a landing page up, put an email capture form. And again, I'm not saying that sort of off the cuff. There are many firms out there who give away their thought leadership for free, and their white papers, their ebooks, whatever they call it, for free, and don't have a lead capture. There's one firm I know, and I won't name them, but they have a phenomenally successful campaign. I was speaking to one of their team and they're like, we've had 20,000 people download it. And my question was, okay, how many emails have you got from that? And I'm like, well, we don't actually have it gated, so none. Well, then for me, that's, it's not worthless. There'll be a lot of people and a lot of brand awareness built through that. But if your goal is lead capture, you can't expect everyone to come to you off the back of your content. You have to encourage them to give you that email address. And so that would be where start with strategy, create the content your target clients will want, and then make sure that you have the capability on your website to capture those. And then obviously, and I guess this is where you and your business come in, is make sure you're following up with those. Because if you don't follow up with leads, you're never going to get the results you want.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, one of our clients called us the other day the conversion experts. So that gives you a rough flavor of what we do, take the lead to a close. So yeah, that's a good way.
Well, and it's so, what you do is so key, because one of the parts of what we have to do when we speak to prospective clients, not all of them, but quite a few, is educate. There's many firms who expect that marketing will do sales. Marketing will suddenly lead to someone picking up the phone and saying, I want a £100,000 project, please. And that's not our job. Marketing is to help get conversations, help smooth conversations along. But your job as sales, if you like, if you're not doing the conversion, how are you going to get a sale? And so my view is, if we can get you 10 leads, you should be able to turn one of them into a conversion. But if you're not doing that work, we could get you 100 leads and they'll go nowhere. So no, I think your side of the coin is just as critical in this, and that's that next part that obviously I'm sure you'll cover in other podcasts with guests who are more expert on sales than me.
Yeah, just to leave your listeners with a bit of intel on our space, the average lead to close rate, although many would say, according to HubSpot, it's 21% aggregated, but the real lead to close rate is actually closer to 4%. Wow. So yeah, it's very, very different, because actually the 21% in HubSpot is often a meeting to close, which is different from a lead to close. So we talked about content, we talked about lead generation, we talked about the strategy first, and then understanding obviously where the content builds around that strategy. What are some of the inexpensive ways to raise your profile? Would that be partnerships or, PR initiatives led internally? What are your recommendations for that, Nick?
I think the first thing it's worth saying, James, is I think everything we suggest to clients is I guess cost effective or low cost, because unless you're sort of a FTSE 100 or in our industry a sort of big four firm, you don't have a large marketing budget, and so you have to spend that wisely. I think if I was, let me take the answer in two ways. So if someone listening to this is just starting out on their own, they've got no marketing budget, they're not going to hire me, they're not going to hire you or anyone else like us. I think the first and foremost is create that big piece of pillar content. If you've got time, spend your weekends creating something great, because you can then reuse it, repurpose it like we spoke about, and it saves you time, because the hardest thing with content creation is the creation, it's the idea generation. And if you're working, flat out 12 hours a day, last thing you want to do is come home and then suddenly do more. So first things first is have something to say, and then the extension from that is say something. So platforms like LinkedIn, and in our industry it's specifically LinkedIn, but in other industries it can be other platforms. That's changed the game for small entrepreneurs and consulting owners, because suddenly you have the ear of the CEO you want to speak to just by connecting with them, just by commenting on their post, just by sharing content. And so that's where I would start, is make sure you're sharing content and you're doing it consistently. And consistently doesn't mean every day, it just means regularly. I think I've seen a ton of examples where people will flurry 3, 4, 5 posts in a week and then silence for 2-3 months. Likewise, I'm not saying you have to post every other day or even every week, but make sure that there's that regularity, that people can build a relationship with you, because in effect, all this, all digital marketing does is lets people build relationships with you at scale. Then if we, I guess, look towards our core client base, so those sort of SME consulting firms, there's a number of things. So first and foremost, right now, if people aren't doing webinars, then that's where they have to start. If you want the cheapest, most cost-effective way of marketing right now, it's a webinar. Your target clients are so keen to get value through webinars. People have tons of time. I mean, we ran one for a client last week. They had 125 people sign up. They had 90 people turn up. I mean, the amount of money that people would have spent previously to run a 90-person event, a fancy hotel in London, canapes, champagne, you can do this for free. And right now, people are receptive to it for free. So that's number one. I think number two, and as you'll know, and I know we've spoken about, I mean, podcasts are a no-brainer for, a small amount of money. And even if they were to do it with us, not a huge investment, you get an evergreen asset that people want to listen to. And it's there and it builds. And I think this is the key thing. I think we touched on before around that pillar content and making sure it's evergreen and that it can be reused. Something like a podcast lives on. I still get feedback on podcast episodes I did 2 years ago. And I've built relationships with guests off the back of podcast episodes I did 2 years ago. So from both a direct way to meet a client through a podcast and through the referred benefit of audience, the audience you build, it's a massive win. And then I guess a sort of really simple one, if you're in a firm of more than sort of 5, let's go a bit bigger. Let's say you're in a firm of 10 to 50. The most cost-effective thing you can then do is get your team to be sharing whatever it is you're putting out. So, one of the other things, and maybe we should have broadened the list from 3 earlier, one of the other things I see consulting firms sort of sometimes get wrong is they'll put out a great piece of content on their corporate LinkedIn page and it will just languish there. No one will like it, no one will engage with it. And so that, coupled with not being reused, means it just disappears. Whereas if you've got 50 people in your firm, 5 degrees of separation, that could potentially be 250 new clients seeing your content. And you've got to pay nothing for that. So when you look at other aspects of, where you could spend marketing budget, these are no-brainers. I think, apologies, James, I sort of went off on one direction, but I'm conscious your question asked around partnerships as well. So massively believe in partnerships. I think, like we're doing here, if you can work with organizations who are similar in terms of outlook, similar in terms of client focus, or just simply have a skill set that could benefit your clients, why not do something together? Particularly if you're a small firm and they're a bigger firm, you leverage that brand, you leverage that social proof. So anywhere you can collaborate, I'm always a big believer in, can you do right now, could you do a micro conference? I'm talking to some service providers in the consulting space who do similar things to us in non-competitive areas about doing the same. Can you do something that puts your brand against theirs in a positive way, puts you next to them, gets their clients to see you, your clients to see them. It's a massive win-win. So yeah, I think anyone, if you are, well, wherever you are in that journey, partnerships would be a massive sort of, I guess, positive as well.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. A couple of interesting insights there, Nick. You mentioned about consultancy owners and social media. Let's pick LinkedIn as a platform. For most consultancy owners, that would be, a first port of call for them. What would you say is the social media skill level or aptitude of a typical consultancy owner?
Wow, that is a broad question, James. And if I'm perfectly honest, the answer is it's the same as, what's the average social media skill of the entire population? We have clients, and I have seen firms who aren't clients where they have phenomenal skill, in terms of building brand, building reputation. I mean, just to give your listeners people to look up, David Lansfield at PwC, and I know he's not a consulting owner, but in terms of sort of that SME end, but, he's brilliant. Nigel Walsh at Deloitte, the guys at 11FS. So, look up David M. Breer.
David Breer, yeah.
Exactly. He's just been on one of our clients' podcasts. What him and 11FS have done, we could have shortened this whole interview, and maybe if people don't enjoy listening to us, they can sort of stop at this point, is go and do what 11FS have done. If you want me to sum up all of the advice we would give you in a nutshell, it's go and copy 11FS, because what they have done is really powerfully built a corporate brand. They have combined that with their personal brands, and they've done it in a way that seems, cool, seems different, seems dynamic. And the way they've done that is through giving value. Ultimately, if you look at any 11FS content, 0 sell, 100% value. That's marketing. But they've been successful off the back of it because they can close like you talked about. So I don't think so much I don't think it's a skill issue. I think some people may not have as much experience as others, but it's just the same as anything else in life. Is you learn it by doing it. You get on, you see what works, you try it. And I think the number one problem, like I said, right back at the start of the show, is the worst thing you can do is not do anything. And actually, for most consulting owners, I think the number one fear is they feel they have to be someone different on social media. People are nervous about just being, Joe, the expert in process improvement, or Jane, the expert in systems optimization. I think sometimes, what we do, people go, oh, that's not sexy. I'm not a startup founder. I'm not a superstar. Actually, just be sharing interesting stuff that you do will appeal to other people. And so that would be the key thing for me. No matter where someone is, the first action they should take is just start sharing useful insights that will help their customers.
Yeah, completely agree with that. And one small tactical thing I picked up around, you were saying the pillar content. We've been recently looking at pillar pages as a good way of structuring content, and so therefore we can drive people to a pillar page, for example, interviews with tech CEOs, so we can see all the other interviews. So not only to encourage other people to be interviewed, but ultimately for other tech CEOs that are interested in us, they can see all the other tech CEOs that we've interviewed. So about, like you said, structuring the content, I think there's a lot to be said for that, and people want simplicity in a time when we're potentially attention poor, and to have things in kind of boxes and categories is nice for people to go forward with. So we talked about growing consultancy firms or consulting firms, and we talked about hiring agencies and strategy and execution at the top of the call. It's very interesting. We went deep into that. But for those consultancies out there, how do you ascertain when and how to delegate certain parts of your marketing function?
And it is it's a really important question. And I think it's a very individual question in terms of when is right for consulting firms. But I think there's really two core tests, and they really revolve around efficiency and effectiveness. So earlier on, I made the point that for small consulting firms, when I say small, we're talking 1, 2, 3 people, very early stage, probably it is not economic to hire an agency. That budget is better spent investing in the team, or frankly, as situations like this where we are now show, sometimes just better putting in the bank for a rainy day. So the first thing is around that efficiency of If you need the money, do it in-house. If you've got to the point where, you're growing, you're making healthy profit margins, then the conversation flips, because for a lot of the firms we work with, and this is broadly the same in any industry, but just to explain it in ours, our clients will be charging themselves out for anything from £1,500 up to £3,000 a day. And they'll be doing that on projects where they're working for 6, 12, 18 months. So that's a lot of money that you can earn by doing your job. And doing the marketing stuff either takes away from that because you've got to take a day off client site, or potentially worse is something you have to do in the margin. So, you're doing it 6 p.m. till 9 p.m. You're doing it at the weekends. And as any business owner knows, you'll be the same. It's not a long-term strategy. I've done it. I'm sure you've done it. Sometimes you've got to work late and into the weekends, but doing that consistently is only going to lead to burnout. So if you've got a successful business, then that question is, can you afford to outsource marketing? And the answer is almost always yes. The decision point is whether you believe it's effective, because if you believe it's effective, it's a no-brainer. If you believe that we can get you one lead, we can turn one cold lead into a hot lead that you can sell to, and that results in £100,000 project, and you do one of them in a year, our fees make financial sense. And if you do more than one in a year, you've got a very good return on investment. So financially, it makes sense at any stage, as long as you have the money coming in. The second part, and this is, I guess, it kind of goes hand in hand with the first part, is, are you the most effective at doing this? So there will come a point for most consulting firms where they can afford to do marketing, in terms of they can outsource it. And then the question becomes, well, who is best to write this? And I think, I speak to, I don't know how many consulting leaders and consulting founders a week. And I regularly get the question of, well, you're not experts in our sort of individual little industry. You don't know making widgets for nuclear power plants. We don't, it's a fact. And therefore, I don't want to outsource this. We are the nuclear power widget making experts, so we're going to do all the marketing. And I think that forgets the fundamental of what a good agency is about. Is our goal is never to be an expert in specific niches within consulting. Our goal is to understand, as a framework and a sort of the level we need to, what resonates with buyers of firms like the ones we work with, and then have the capability to, you mentioned around execution. This is where execution is critical, is if you don't have the capability to translate what your client is trying to say into an effective marketing message, there's zero execution. You're just going to take their time. And that is where, we've heard a lot of sort of negatives about, and I think where our industry gets a bad rap is, I have heard clients say, well, we had an agency and all they really did was just badger us for information. And it was almost just like having sort of someone on our backs. It's like a bad personal trainer. And for me, that is a bad agency. What a good agency should be able to do is take your message, distill your ideas, distill your expertise, and turn it into valuable, tangible marketing content. And that's where the effectiveness comes in, because our industry, and again I talk sort of management consulting here, but it's the same in tech. The people in it are extremely driven, extremely intelligent, extremely bright, motivated people. Most of them have come through a university, they've written a lot, and almost because of that, sometimes I think people forget that copywriting is a real skill. They almost think, I wrote essays in university, I got a 2-1, I write client reports all the time, my clients love them. Of course I can write marketing copy. And I think the thing that, I spend a lot of time educating prospective clients on is that marketing is completely different. The skills you need, the style, what you need to consider is completely different. And so that's where that effectiveness piece comes in, is if you are not a talented copywriter, and that's not that, you've written a client report or you've done a dissertation, it's that you can write copy that lights clients up from a marketing perspective. If that's not you, and you have the money to outsource it, you should outsource it. If either of those two questions aren't true, you should probably keep it in-house. So I appreciate it's probably a longer answer, but hopefully, for yourself and some of the listeners, just gives that detail. I mean, I'd be interested, sort of, does that echo, how you advise your clients? Any builds on that? What's your take, James?
Yeah, I think I like your summary of efficiency and effectiveness. I do agree with you that you've got that point of the smaller firm probably need the money, may do it in-house or have freelancers or part-time people helping them out. And then the effectiveness is often the scalability of the company. Are they the best person to do it? Is it better with an agency if I'm £1,500 or £2,000 a day or equivalent? could I, in effect, be paying someone, for that, a couple of days a month to do that for me? And what would it mean if I did have, another project a month coming into the business? So, yeah, I certainly agree with that. I think the only thing I would add to that is, really breaking down the marketing flow and understanding, not necessarily from I need to stop and think and slow down my thinking, but more of a capture mechanism. So looking at the marketing flow as you're doing it, capturing, recording those systems that in effect or practices you're going through, and then evaluating where those potentially can be optimized. Because I think providing more value even to potential partners is something that is neglected sometimes, because if you're able to show a potential marketing agency or 2 or 3 that you may be considering, this is the flow, guys, this is our marketing plan, this is the flow, this is how it works. And that may even be nice live interactive content in terms of capturing those systems. If I was, potentially in your shoes and even in my shoes, when people do it from a sales perspective, that's very insightful. And then I can certainly advise, and I can advise on a deeper level, because my content and kind of context absorption is so much higher than if it was like, okay, tell me about your business, what do you do, where are you from, who do you serve? All those questions are valuable, but it's not what people want sometimes is, getting down to tactical level, because like you said, it's an effectiveness equation. So now we're talking about added value beyond the base level. So the transfer of knowledge needs to be smart, and it needs to be at a level where obviously the new provider can add additional value rather than just maybe maintain the base level, unless obviously the base level is extremely high and it's maybe jumped and they just want to keep it at that level. But if they want to continually grow from that level, I think providing more value and depth and context to your partners would help you ascertain where they're going to produce value, and also in that decision criteria, sketching out your ROI, understanding what are those calculations, deciding on the ROI calculation and costing time into that equation as well as a consultancy owner. And the second thing I would add on top of that is that you do understand within that flow where you have strengths and weaknesses in your team and where the agency could add value. And if they don't correlate and they almost don't pitch back to you the value that you perceive that you need and give you the comfort levels you need, then you need to look at another provider or another solution to that problem.
I think, great additions. I think it's a really, really key point. And I always find, if we could go back and do one of the answers again, I'd probably add what you've just said to it of, fundamentally a good agency has to understand your unique position. I think, if you come with a sort of cookie cutter boilerplate, we will do 3 campaigns, it will get you 10, 100% ROI and 10,000 followers. Well, that may be right for that organization. It may not be. And exactly like you say, you need to understand where that client is in its journey, what they've got mapped out, and where your time is best focused to give them that, greatest return on investment. And rarely is that possible with a sort of one size fits all approach. So no, really agree. And, it's a critical point.
So last question for me, Nick. Sure. What's the best way to review additional marketing channels and tactics to amplify what you're doing, but without distracting from the core marketing flow that you have at the company?
Sure. So I guess it talks to a few things we've said today, and probably why it's your last question, James. So I think first and foremost, like you said, you need to know what that marketing flow is. And by flow, I'm assuming, you mean plan, are we doing campaigns, how much social media, that sort of thing. So firstly, what is that baseline? Because it'll be different for everyone. And then I think it's, 2 key points we've talked about before. Start small and commit for a decent period of time. I think, no matter what you're doing, 12 weeks should be the baseline, and that's both that's in life, not just in marketing. But for marketing, you need to test something for 12 weeks. Just putting out a blog and saying, oh well, I got 3 likes, no one's commented, no one's called me, it's not a good strategy. It's not going to lead anywhere. So start small. I mentioned earlier about our email, our Friday 3. That was not a big project for us. Me and the team took turns at writing an email. I had to write one probably once a month. That's not a big investment of time, but what it gave us was a way to test. Likewise, if you're trying to test a podcast, for instance, do what we're doing here. Speak to 5 people put it out to the world, and see what happens. So I think it's very much start small, test, learn, and some of this sounds cliche, I appreciate, but it's cliche because it works. I think where people go wrong is they either don't put enough in, or actually they go the other way, and this is particularly with, I guess, more traditional channels. People put it all on black. They go, right, I'm going to sponsor, that big conference. I'm going to throw 20 grand at the wall. I mean, you are just as sort of likely to win as you are going to the casino, and you'll probably have more fun at the casino, because if you're betting that much money on roulette, they'll give you a free bottle of champagne. So, when you're thinking about what to do, that's the other end of the spectrum. I've seen far too many firms fall foul of this. They'll go, right, we're going to stick an article in Raconteur, or we're going to do a conference. That's the wrong end. Likewise, not doing enough is the wrong end. But for that sort of small piece, start, test, learn, and then decide, do we keep going, or do we park it and try something else?
That's really helpful. So I've learned a lot. As always, I love speaking to marketeers because it's not my strength area. And I continue.
I feel cheated on, James. I thought I was the only one. I didn't realize there were others.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm always learning from marketeers because we get engaged with them, with our clients, CMOs, heads of marketing at these tech companies, and we're continually learning because marketing and sales are coming closer together. So that's what I mean by my learning. So for those listeners out there on our channels, where's the best place to, one, find the digital marketing framework that you referred to earlier, and two is to find out more about what you guys do and how you might be able to help them?
So best place to reach me, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can get me over email, so nick@createengage.co.uk. For the digital marketing framework or our digital marketing secrets ebook that I mentioned as well, if you go to our website, createengage.co.uk, all of that content's available on there. I'll obviously, James, after this, I'll send you links as well. So if you want to put them direct in the show notes, you can. And, really, really happy for people to reach out, get in touch. If they want to just have a chat, if they want to sort of, kick a few things around, always happy to have a conversation. And yeah, very happy to help people.
I really like it. And certainly we'll get quite a bit of engagement. I'm sure questions from friends as well in my network about this. But we can certainly speak about that another time, about some other networks I'm a part of that maybe It'd be great to engage you in as well. But Nick, have a lovely evening. It's been great to connect today. And we'll speak soon for sure.
Brilliant, James. Thank you very much. Been great speaking to you. Thanks for having me on. Cheers.
Cheers, Nick. Bye for now.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Climb in Consulting podcast. If you did, I would be very grateful if you could leave a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or your podcast platform of choice, whichever one you may be using. And please also share this with anyone that you think could benefit from hearing today's interview. If you want to get in touch or give me any feedback about the podcast, please feel free to drop me an email. It's nick@climbinconsulting.com, and I look forward to hearing from you.